I didn't say a word when the HOA president banged her fist on my porch railing, red-faced and demanding to know why her niece's wedding had been canceled at the last minute. I just handed her the certified deed transfer papers, notarized, and recorded with the county clerk, showing my undisputed ownership of the entire event venue, the same property she had promised to use free of charge. Her voice cracked when she saw the date the ownership had been transferred. That was the moment her knees seemed to give way, like she had been leaning on a wall she thought was solid, only to find it was made of smoke. She knew before I said a word that her plans, her pride, and her little HOA power trip had just dissolved, in front of her entire committee. I didn't need to shout. The paperwork was louder than anything I could say. Before all of this, my life here was quiet. I moved into this community 6 years ago after inheriting a modest craftsman-style home from my aunt. She had kept it in pristine condition, with white-painted trim and a wraparound porch that always smelled faintly of jasmine in the summer. The property sat on a stretch of land that sloped down toward a creek, and right at the base of that slope, on the other side of a row of cottonwoods, sat an old event hall, a brick building from the 1920s that had been restored for weddings and community gatherings. It was beautiful, but I never had much use for it myself. My joy came from morning coffee on the porch, weekends spent restoring, old furniture in the garage, and the occasional walk down to the creek to fish for smallmouth bass. I wasn't a recluse, but I wasn't looking to be part of any social circus. The HOA board seemed harmless enough in the beginning. They waved when I first moved in, dropped off a welcome packet with their bylaws, and then left me alone. That was all I wanted. The first sign of trouble came last spring, tucked under my doormat in a laminated folder. It was an event usage notification from the HOA, printed on their letterhead, stating that the community event space would be booked for several weekends over the summer for weddings, reunions, and corporate retreats. The schedule included specific dates, and one in particular caught my eye, the second Saturday in August. It was listed as reserved private wedding, full access required. I might not have cared much except for one detail. That community event space they were referring to was the old brick hall, sitting entirely on my land. It was part of the same parcel my aunt had left me, recorded under the same legal description. The HOA had no ownership stake, no easement, no lease agreement. I hadn't signed a thing giving them access. At first, I thought it had to be a clerical mistake. I tried to handle it reasonably. I called the number on the letter and spoke with the HOA secretary, a woman named Brenda, who chirped like a cheerful telemarketer until I explained the property line situation. Her tone cooled fast, like someone flipping a switch from customer service to corporate defense. She said she would pass my concerns along to the board, but also made it sound like this was just how things worked. The HOA had always used the venue. A week later, I got a curt email from the president herself, Marlene, informing me that the August wedding was a community-supported event and that my cooperation was expected. There was no offer to rent the space, no request, just a demand dressed up as neighborly obligation. That's when I knew this wasn't an innocent misunderstanding. I kept trying to be civil. I replied with a scanned copy of my property deed, highlighting the legal boundaries and parcel ID, and I asked them to please adjust their event schedule. Marlene didn't respond. Instead, the HOA started sending me maintenance violation notices for things that were either non-existent or laughably petty: a gutter angled incorrectly, a shed door painted outside approved pallet, and my personal favorite, unapproved landscaping modifications for planting marigolds. When I tried calling again, Brenda claimed she couldn't comment on board matters. At this point, my irritation had settled into something sharper. I wasn't angry in the way they probably expected. I just stopped wasting energy on trying to persuade them and started focusing on the law. That's when the real work began. I dug through the county's property archives, pulling every historical record on my parcel. I found the original land survey from 1921, the transfer documents to my aunt, and the clear fact that the event hall had never been subdivided or sold separately. I also found something more recent, a minor tax lien from years back that my aunt had quietly paid to keep the property whole. That meant the HOA had no financial claim either. I started documenting every HOA notice, every email, every voicemail. I also reached out to a real estate attorney, not to sue, but to make sure every move I made was airtight. That's when the idea hit me. If the HOA thought they could schedule weddings on my property without permission, then maybe it was time I put that property to a use that left no room for misunderstandings. I learned that the event hall was technically zoned as community mixed use, which meant I could rent, lease, or even transfer ownership, as long as the paperwork met county requirements. So, a month before the August wedding, I quietly negotiated a transfer of the building to a small private nonprofit that specialized in historical property preservation. The deed was recorded, the change posted publicly on the county site, and the nonprofit immediately closed the venue for restoration work. They locked the doors, put up scaffolding, and posted a sign. Private property, no trespassing without written permission. I didn't tell the HOA a word until the week of the wedding, and that brought us back to my porch, where Marlene stood trembling, holding the reality she couldn't undo. She sputtered something about breach of community, trust, about her niece's special day. I didn't interrupt. I just let the silence stretch, then told her plainly that the venue was no longer under my ownership, that the new owners had no agreement with the HOA, and that any attempt to use it would constitute trespassing. She knew it was over. Not just the wedding, but her unspoken claim over something that was never hers to begin with. The aftermath was quieter than I expected. The wedding was moved to a hotel ballroom an hour away, and I heard through the grapevine that it was a logistical disaster. The HOA stopped sending me violation notices. Marlene kept her position, but her grip on the neighborhood softened. People had seen her lose, and they started questioning other traditions she enforced. As for me, my life went back to what I wanted from the start. Mornings on the porch, fishing on weekends, and no one trying to tell me how to use what's mine. Now, when I walk past the event hall and see the scaffolding, I smile. It's still beautiful, and it's still standing, but it's finally beyond the reach of people who thought power was theirs just because no one had challenged it.